We hope you enjoy An Armada of Troubles. The True Tempest of 1588 Wasn't the Weather by Rachel Lawson. It was summer in the year 1588, and the Queen's garden party was a disaster. Rain hammered the guests, soaked the musicians, drowned the pastries, and turned the lawn into a swamp. Elizabeth I stood beneath a dripping canopy, glowering at the sky as if it had personally betrayed her. "Walsingham," she snapped. "Your weatherman is wrong again." Walsingham bowed, perfectly dry, beneath an umbrella no one saw him acquire. "I shall address the matter, Your Majesty." He left her and crossed the soggy lawn to where Sir Blake Alexander stood under a tree, arms folded, muttering at the clouds. "Sir Blake," Walsingham said, "the Queen is displeased with the weather." Blake didn't even look at him. "My garden needs a good watering." "Yes," Walsingham replied, already turning away, "but Her Majesty does not." And he walked off. Blake glared after him. "He's always ordering me about and waltzing off like that," he grumbled. "Never waits for an answer, never listens, never—" He stomped out into the rain. "Fine," he muttered at the sky. "Have it your way." The rain stopped. The clouds evaporated. Sunlight poured down in a warm, golden flood. The court gasped. The Queen smiled. Walsingham pretended he had expected this all along. Blake wandered off, still complaining. "My roses are dying of thirst." The sun blazed down on the Queen's garden as if it had never rained at all. Courtiers wrung out their sleeves discreetly. Musicians tried to pretend their lutes hadn't been waterlogged. The pastries were beyond saving. Queen Elizabeth I lifted her face to the sudden warmth and sighed with regal satisfaction. "Ah, much better." She turned to Walsingham, who stood at her side, perfectly dry as always. "Sir Francis, you have done well." Walsingham bowed with immaculate calm. "Your Majesty is kind." Behind him, Blake froze mid-stomp. He had just trudged back across the lawn, boots squelching, muttering about roses and the indignity of being summoned like a weather servant. Now he stared at the Queen and Walsingham, jaw dropping. "Blake, what? He didn't— I was the one—" Elizabeth continued, oblivious. "Truly, Sir Francis, your efficiency is unmatched. The weather obeys you as if you command the heavens themselves." Walsingham inclined his head. "I do my best, Your Majesty." Blake made a noise somewhere between a groan and a strangled thunderclap. "Blake, he didn't even touch the sky. I was out there in the rain." A nearby courtier shushed him, assuming he was simply complaining again. Elizabeth smiled serenely at Walsingham. "See that it stays pleasant for the rest of the afternoon." "Of course, Your Majesty." Blake threw his hands up. "Blake, oh, marvellous. Yes. Ask him. I'll just be over here, drying out my socks and watching my roses die." Walsingham glanced back at Blake, only long enough to murmur, "Good work, Sir Blake," in the tone of a man congratulating a horse for not kicking him. Then he walked away. Blake groaned so loudly a few clouds reconsidered forming. The sun was shining again, the garden party revived, and Queen Elizabeth I, now in a far better mood, extended her hand toward Blake with royal expectation. "Sir Blake," she said graciously, "your service to the crown is appreciated." Blake blinked. He looked at Walsingham, who gave him a tiny nod that meant, "Do not embarrass me." Blake sighed, stepped forward, and bowed. He took the Queen's hand with all the reluctant dignity of a man being forced to pet a cat that hates him. He leaned in to kiss her fingers. Crack. A sharp spark of blue-white magic snapped between them. Elizabeth yelped. Blake jerked back. Several courtiers gasped. One fainted. The Queen shook her hand, eyes wide. "Good heavens!" Blake winced. "Sorry, Your Majesty. Bit of static. Happens when I'm annoyed." Walsingham, without missing a beat. "He has been working very hard today, Your Majesty." Elizabeth narrowed her eyes at Blake. "See that you contain yourself, Sir Blake." Blake groaned. "I try. The weather listens. People don't." Walsingham cleared his throat sharply, the universal signal for stop talking before you incriminate yourself. Blake folded his arms, muttering, "This is why I don't touch things, or people, or history." Blake was secretly a time traveller trapped in the distant past rather reluctantly. Elizabeth flexed her fingers once more, then waved him away with regal impatience. "Very well. Do whatever it is you do. Just refrain from electrocuting your queen." Blake bowed again, grumbling. "No promises." Walsingham's private chamber was dim, quiet, and lined with enough paperwork to drown a lesser man. Blake stood dripping on the carpet, arms folded, looking like a thundercloud in human form. Walsingham shut the door with a soft click. "Sir Blake," he said in a low, controlled voice, "you electrocuted the Queen." Blake groaned. It was a tiny spark. She yelped. "She startled me." "You startled her." Blake threw up his hands. "I can't control myself sometimes. Magic leaks when I'm annoyed." Walsingham gave him a flat look, then stopped being annoyed. Blake stared at him. "Have you met me?" Walsingham ignored that. Her Majesty expects better. Try. Blake muttered something about unreasonable monarchs and unreasonable spy masters and unreasonable weather. Walsingham cut him off. "Good, you're in the right mood. I have a mission for you." Blake groaned louder. "Of course you do." Walsingham opened a door to reveal 3 of his agents waiting in the corridor, cloaked, serious, and already irritated by Blake's presence. "Gentlemen," Walsingham said, "Sir Blake will accompany you." All 3 agents looked like they'd been handed a live eel. Blake scowled. "Why? You don't need me." One of the agents forced a smile so patronizing it could curdle milk. "Sir Blake," he said, "you are the most important member of the team." Blake narrowed his eyes. "Really?" "Oh yes," another agent added, patting him on the shoulder like he was a nervous horse. "Absolutely vital." Blake muttered, "I don't believe a word of that." Walsingham clapped him on the back. "Do your thing." And then, of course, Walsingham walked away before Blake could protest. Blake sighed, stepped outside, and glared at the perfectly clear night. "Fine," he grumbled. "Fog. Whatever." The air thickened instantly. Mist rolled in like a living creature, swallowing the street, the lamps, the rooftops. Everything. The agents nodded approvingly. "Excellent," one whispered. "Let's move," said another. And just like that, they vanished into the fog on their mission, forgetting Blake entirely. Blake stood alone in the swirling mist, blinking. "Not even a thanks?" he muttered. "I should expect as much." He shoved his hands in his sleeves and trudged off in the opposite direction, grumbling to himself as the fog curled around him like a sulky cat. Blake stomped through the palace corridor, boots leaving damp fog prints on the polished floor. He was muttering the whole way, a steady stream of complaints that echoed off the stone. "Sent me out like a blasted lantern boy. Most important member of the team, they say. Didn't even wait for the fog to settle. Ungrateful lot. I should have let them walk into a wall." He pushed open the door to the smaller withdrawing room, the one he used to hide from courtiers, and nearly collided with Lady Angela. She looked up from her embroidery, eyes softening the moment she saw him. "Oh, Blake," she said gently, "you're back." Blake groaned. "Unfortunately." Angela set her work aside and crossed to him, brushing a bit of lingering fog from his sleeve. "You look exhausted," she murmured. "I am exhausted," Blake snapped, then sighed. "They dragged me out, made me conjure fog, then ran off without so much as a thank you, again." Angela smiled faintly. You know how Walsingham's men are. Yes. Rude, ungrateful, and somehow always convinced I'm a walking weather vane. She cupped his cheek, thumb brushing the faint chill of magic still clinging to him. You did well. Blake blinked at her, thrown off balance. I did? Of course. You always do. He huffed, looking away. Well, someone has to. And apparently it's always me. Angela laughed softly. The kind of laugh that made Blake's shoulders unclench despite himself. Come sit, she said, guiding him toward the cushioned bench. You can complain as much as you like. Blake sank down beside her with a dramatic sigh. Good, because I intend to. Angela threaded her arm through his. I know. He leaned his head back against the wall, eyes closing, voice dropping to a grumble. Not even a thank you. I swear, the fog was the best part of that mission. At least it listens to me. Angela rested her head on his shoulder. I listen to you, she said softly. Blake cracked one eye open, looked at her, and, very reluctantly, smiled. Yes, you do. And for the first time that day, the storm inside him eased. Blake had finally stopped muttering long enough to sip a cup of lukewarm wine. Lady Angela sat beside him, her hand resting lightly on his arm, grounding him in a way nothing else ever could. You did well, she said again, softly. Blake huffed. If by well you mean was used like a magical mop, then yes, brilliant performance. Angela smiled. You're home now, that's what matters. Blake opened his mouth to complain further, but the door to the withdrawing room creaked open. A young courier slipped inside, pale and breathless, bowing quickly. Sir Blake, Lady Angela, forgive the intrusion. Blake groaned. Oh, what now? The courier swallowed. I was told to deliver this message to you. Convenient, Blake muttered. The courier held out a sealed note. It concerns a sighting off the coast, Spanish ships, many of them. Angela's hand tightened on Blake's arm. Blake blinked. Ships, Spanish? How many is many? The courier hesitated. The report says, a fleet, sir. Blake stared at him. Angela whispered, Blake. Blake rubbed his face with both hands. No, absolutely not. I just fixed the weather. I just sat down. I haven't even finished complaining about the last disaster. The courier shifted nervously. Sir, they say it may be the Armada. Blake froze. The room seemed to tilt. Angela's voice was soft but steady. Blake, what will you do? He let out a long, exhausted groan that sounded like a storm gathering over the horizon. What I always do, he muttered. Fix everything while everyone else panics. He stood, shoulders slumping, eyes rolling skyward. Of course it's the Armada. Of course it's today. Why wouldn't it be? History hates me. Angela rose with him, touching his cheek. Be careful. Blake kissed her forehead, sighing, I'll try, but you know how the weather gets when I'm annoyed. Angela smiled sadly. Then heaven help Spain. Blake trudged toward the door, muttering under his breath. Can't even have one peaceful evening. Roses dying, Queen shocked, spies ungrateful, and now a fleet. The courier watched him go, wide-eyed. Angela watched him go, worried. And somewhere far out at sea, the first dark clouds began to gather. Blake barely had time to finish muttering about ungrateful spies when two of Walsingham's agents appeared in the doorway like grim bookends. Sir Blake, one said. No, Blake replied immediately. The secretary requests your presence. He always requests my presence when something terrible is happening. That is correct. Before Blake could protest further, each agent took an arm and began steering him down the corridor. I can walk, you know, Blake snapped, stumbling as they marched him along. We are aware, sir. Then why are you dragging me? You walk slower when you're complaining. I complain all the time. Exactly. Blake groaned so loudly a tapestry trembled. They hauled him out into the courtyard where Walsingham stood waiting, cloak snapping in the rising wind. The sky above was already darkening, clouds gathering like an audience. Blake pointed upward accusingly. I didn't do that. Not yet, Walsingham said, but you will. Blake scowled. I hate when you say things like that. Walsingham gestured sharply. To the cliffs. Blake dug in his heels. I haven't even had dinner. Spain has sent a fleet. So, let them come tomorrow? Sir Blake. Blake threw his hands up. Fine, but I'm doing this under protest. You do everything under protest. That's because everything is terrible. Walsingham ignored him and strode ahead. The agents resumed dragging Blake after him. The path to the cliffs was long, muddy, and windswept. Blake complained the entire way. My boots are ruined. My cloak is too thin. My roses are dying. My wife is worried. My back hurts. My magic hurts. My feelings hurt. Walsingham didn't slow down. Sir Blake, he said over his shoulder, England requires your assistance. England requires a holiday, Blake muttered. The wind picked up, tugging at his hair. The sea roared below, restless and rising. Blake glared at the horizon. Oh, wonderful. Look at that. A fleet, a very large fleet. Why is it always me? Because, Walsingham said, you are the only one who can stop it. Blake groaned. I hate that answer. I know. They reached the cliff top. The Spanish Armada stretched across the horizon like a floating city. Blake stared at it, unimpressed. Ridiculous, he muttered. Absolutely ridiculous. Who needs that many ships? Show-offs. Walsingham stepped back. Do what you must. Oh, now you want me to do my thing, Blake grumbled. But do I get thanks, appreciation, a warm meal? No, just fix it, Sir Blake. He stomped forward, lifted his hands, and sighed the sigh of a man who has been denied peace for centuries. Fine, he said to the sky. Let's get this over with. The wind tore at Blake's cloak as he stepped to the cliff's edge, boots sinking into the wet grass. Below him, the sea rolled in slow, lazy breaths, far too calm for what was coming. Above him, the sky was insultingly clear. He scowled. The Armada's coming, he thought, and the words pulsed like a heartbeat. What a bad day for a war. Behind him, Walsingham stood with his arms folded, cloak snapping in the rising breeze. Sir Blake, he said, England requires... Yes, I know, Blake snapped. England requires everything from me. He lifted his hands. The air tightened. A low hum rippled outward, the first note of a storm that hadn't yet realized it existed. Blake's thoughts spilled into the wind, half complaint, half incantation. The seas are calm, and the sky is clear. I thought they sank at sea in a storm. The day is too nice. They'll be here too soon. The sky darkened as if embarrassed by its earlier cheerfulness. Walsingham took a prudent step back. Blake groaned. What do I have to do everything myself? The wind answered with a sharp, rising whistle. Fine, Blake thought. A storm is needed, so a storm will come. Lightning flickered in the far distance. A warning. A promise. Blake's voice deepened, not singing words, but shaping the rhythm of the storm with the cadence of his irritation. I will make one, a great one to sink the armies of Spain. The sea heaved upward, as if startled awake. Waves rose, swelling into mountains of water. The Spanish ships on the horizon bobbed uneasily, their sails trembling. Blake's eyes glowed faintly. He stepped closer to the cliff's edge, muttering, The Armada's coming. What a bad day for a war. The sky cracked open. Thunder rolled in slow, deliberate pulses, matching the rhythm of Blake's breath. Lightning spidered across the clouds, racing like veins of fire. The Armada shuddered. Blake thrust one hand forward. The wind obeyed. It slammed into the fleet with the force of a god's exasperation. Masts tilted. Sails snapped. Men shouted. Blake's thoughts sharpened, slicing through the air. If England wants thunder, I'll give them thunder. If Spain wants glory, I'll give them waves tall enough to swallow it. The clouds spiraled downward, forming a vortex above the Spanish flagship. Walsingham whispered, "Merciful heavens." Blake heard him. "Don't bring them into this," he muttered. "They started enough storms without me." He raised both hands. The sea surged. A colossal wave rose, higher, higher, impossibly high, blotting out the horizon. A bolt of lightning struck Blake. "Are a right, Sir Blake?" Walsingham asked him, concerned. Blake just sighed, unsinged. "Should have stayed home." He dropped his hands as if it was nothing. The wave fell. The Armada vanished beneath it. Silence. The clouds peeled away like frightened animals. The sea smoothed itself, pretending innocence. Blake swayed on his feet. Walsingham rushed forward. "Sir Blake!" Blake held up a hand. "Don't. I'm fine. Just tired, and hungry, and annoyed, and wet." He looked at the now empty horizon. "Well," he muttered, "that's one way to ruin Spain's evening." He trudged past Walsingham, cloak dragging, muttering the whole way. "Sink a fleet, Blake. Save the realm, Sir Blake. Fix the weather, Sir Blake. No one ever says, 'Sir Blake, would you like a biscuit?' No, it's always storms and spies and—" His voice faded into the wind. Walsingham watched him go, equal parts relieved and terrified. "Manageable catastrophe," he whispered. "Barely." By morning, the palace was buzzing like a kicked beehive. Courtiers clustered in corners, whispering behind fans and goblets, each retelling the story of the miraculous storm with increasing embellishment. "Did you hear? The storm came out of nowhere. A divine sign, surely. Some say the sea itself rose up to defend England. I heard it was angels. I heard it was the Queen's prayers. I heard Walsingham did something terribly clever." Not one of them mentioned Blake. Blake walked through the hall, hair still damp, cloak still smelling faintly of ozone, muttering under his breath. "Angels, honestly. I do all the work, and angels get the credit. Typical." A pair of ladies swept past him. "Sir Francis is a genius," one whispered. "Truly," the other agreed. "Imagine commanding the weather like that." Blake stopped dead. "Commanding the—" He can't even command his own umbrella. But they were already gone. Elizabeth I stood at the centre of the great hall, radiant in gold, surrounded by admirers. Walsingham stood beside her, hands folded neatly, expression politely blank. "Sir Francis," the Queen declared, loud enough for the entire court to hear, "your efforts have saved England once again." Walsingham bowed. "Your Majesty is gracious." Blake, standing a few paces behind him, made a noise like a dying kettle. Elizabeth continued, "The storm that destroyed the Armada was nothing short of miraculous. Your planning, your foresight." Blake's eye twitched. Walsingham, without turning, murmured, "Don't." Blake hissed back, "I will absolutely do." Elizabeth raised her voice. "Truly, Sir Francis, you are the shield of this realm." Blake threw his hands up. "Oh, for heaven's sake!" The entire hall turned. Elizabeth blinked. "Sir Blake? Did you have something to add?" Blake opened his mouth. Walsingham stepped sharply on his foot. Blake yelped, No, nothing to add. Just delighted, very delighted, overjoyed, positively ecstatic." Elizabeth nodded, satisfied, and returned to praising Walsingham. Blake leaned toward him and muttered, "You're welcome, by the way." Walsingham didn't look at him. Yes, thank you. Now be quiet. Blake folded his arms, glowering at the ceiling. Angels, he muttered. Honestly. The palace gardens were quiet in the late afternoon, the air still carrying the faint scent of last night's storm. Blake trudged down the gravel path like a man walking to his own execution, muttering under his breath the entire way. Miraculous storm, they say. Divine intervention, they say. Angels, they say. Idiots, all of them. He rounded the corner to his private rosebeds and stopped dead. The roses were ruined, blackened, flattened, drowned, a battlefield of petals and broken stems. Blake stared at them, horrified. Oh, wonderful, he groaned. Perfect. I save England, and my roses die for it. Typical. He knelt beside the nearest bush, lifting a wilted bloom between two fingers, as if it had personally betrayed him. I told you not to panic, he muttered to the plant. But no, you had to flop over dramatically like everyone else. He sat back on his heels, cloak pooling around him, looking utterly defeated. Spain gets a storm. I get a funeral. A courtier passing by paused at the sight of him. The great sorcerer, the man who had destroyed the Armada, sitting in the dirt talking to dead flowers. The courtier wisely kept walking. Blake didn't notice. He picked up another ruined rose, sighed, and let it fall. No one thanks me. No one appreciates me. And now this. My poor roses. They didn't deserve this. I didn't deserve this. Honestly, I should have let Spain handle the weather. He flopped backwards onto the grass, staring up at the sky with the expression of a man personally wronged by the heavens. Clear skies, he muttered. Of course. Now you behave. He threw an arm over his eyes. I hate everything. And the sky wisely stayed silent. By midday, the court had worked itself into a frenzy of speculation. The miraculous storm had become the only topic worth discussing, and the truth that Blake had done it while complaining was nowhere to be found. Blake walked through the great hall, trying to ignore the whispers. He failed. Lady Pembroke, fanning herself dramatically. I heard Sir Blake is half mermaid. That's why he controls the sea. Lady Essex, scandalised. Half mermaid? Don't be ridiculous. He's clearly a fallen angel. Look at his hair. Lord Suffolk, leaning in conspiratorially. No, you're both wrong. He's Walsingham's illegitimate son. That's why he gets away with everything. Blake stopped mid-stride. Illegitimate son? I'm older than Walsingham. The courtiers gasped and scattered like startled pigeons. Blake groaned. I hate this place. Later, in a quiet corner of the palace, Elizabeth beckoned Walsingham closer. She lowered her voice to a whisper, the kind that still carried across the room. Sir Francis, is Blake dangerous? Walsingham didn't hesitate. Only when awake, Your Majesty. Elizabeth blinked. That is not reassuring. It was not meant to be. She frowned, glancing toward the window where Blake was visible in the garden, poking sadly at his dead roses. He seems volatile, accurate, and unpredictable. Extremely. And prone to atmospheric incidents, constantly. Elizabeth pressed a hand to her forehead. Then why do we keep him? Walsingham folded his hands neatly. Because, Your Majesty. He sank the Armada. Elizabeth sighed. Yes, well, there is that. Blake knelt among his ruined rose bushes, muttering to himself. Half mermaid, honestly, I can't even swim. He plucked up a wilted bloom and glared at it. Fallen angel, as if I'd fall for anyone. He tossed the rose aside. And Walsingham's son? Absolutely not. I'd rather be a mermaid. He flopped backwards onto the grass with a dramatic groan. "I hate everything," he moaned, depressed by everything.
The Armada's coming, what a bad day for a war. The seas are calm and the sky is clear. I thought they sank at sea in a storm. The day is too nice, they'll be here too soon. What do I have to do? Everything myself. A storm is needed, so a storm will come. I will make one a great one to sink the armies of Spain. The Armada's coming, what a bad day for a war. The seas are calm and the sky is clear. I thought they sank at sea in a storm. The day is too nice, they'll be here too soon. What do I have to do? Everything myself. The storm is needed, so a storm will come. I will make one a great one to sink the armies of Spain. At sea in a storm, the day is too nice, they'll be here too soon. What do I have to do? Everything myself. A storm is needed, so a storm will come. I will make one a great one to sink the armies of Spain, said Blake, a time-traveling sorcerer to himself, casting a spell to make a storm to sink the naval assault of England in Tudor times.